A Lantern, Chapter 3. In the midst of the hurry and confusion and fright, Abby gathered that they were all going to get back into the wagons and go down to Grandpa Deal's, wherever that was. Everything that could be handled easily was thrown into the wagons. Janet rolled a fresh batch of bread and raised donuts into a homespun tablecloth. Tom tied old Whitey to the back of his wagon and put her new calf in the end of the box so she could see her offspring and not bellow for it. Abby clutched the hairy chest and protecting arms. The cavalcade started lumberingly down the river road. Through the dark timber they drove, over spongy, moist leaves, past thickets of sumac and hazelbrush, their hearts pounding in alarm, their bodies tense with fear, every tree the potential hiding place of an Indian. Out of the cool river road and onto the hot, flat prairie they came as suddenly as one opens a door upon a bright, heated room. For 2 miles they drove over the faintly marked prairie trail, coming then to another wooded section and to the largest house in the community, a big log structure which looked palatial to Abby's eyes after Tom Graves' one-room cabin and the sheep shed. Other horse and ox teams were hitched to the straw-roofed log stable. Other families were scurrying into the house with smoked hams and batches of bread and valued possessions in their arms. Not far from the back door of the big log house, Abby, still grasping the hairy chest, stopped to watch a boy of 12 or 13 caressing the sleek, quivering head of a young deer tied to a tree by a strap around its neck. A small, severe-looking woman in a black calico dress with a black netting cap tied under her sharply pointed chin was scolding nervously. "No, Willie, you can't. I won't have it. It's bad enough to have the whole kit and caboodle in the country coming in tracking up and all the rag, shag, and bobtails bringing their stuff." "But, Mother," the boy pleaded, "I'll keep her by herself. I'll get her up the loft stairs." "No, you shan't, Willie Deal." And then a big, powerful man came out, a man with only one arm, his left sleeve pinned to the side of his coat. He had a shock of wiry black hair and an equally wiry beard which gave him an unkempt look. But his eyes were blue and twinkling and kind. They held the calmness of blue ice, but not its coldness. He put his one hand on the boy's dark head now and said quietly, "You'd best let her go, son. She'll take care of herself, and it's only fair to give her her freedom." Without a word, the boy cut the strap at the fawn's throat, and even while he was unloosing the piece around her neck, she darted from him lightly, gracefully, into the hazel brush. Inside the big log house, where all seemed confusion, Abby, after a time, sought out the dark-haired boy. "Do you think you'll ever get her back?" she asked shyly. "Get what?" "Your little dear." "Nah, never." The boy turned his head away. Abby's heart seemed bursting with sorrow for him. There was that word again, never. It was the saddest word. It made her throat hurt. Willie Deal would never, never have his little dear again. With his head still averted, the boy said tensely, "I found her and raised her myself." Abby put her hand out gently and touched the boy's arm. "I'm sorry." Her voice held deep sympathy. "Ah," he threw up his fine dark head. "I didn't care." But Abby knew it was not so. Abby knew that he cared. It seemed precarious business to take time to describe Grandpa and Grandma Deal. When a band of disgruntled Indians is reported on its way down the Shell Rock, but, pending its arrival, one ought to know a little of Gideon Deal and his wife. They were not yet out of their 40s. Indeed, their youngest daughter, Regina, was only 9. But through older offspring scattered about the community, several grandchildren had been presented to them. And so, to differentiate them from other and younger Deals, the titles Grandpa and Grandma had been bestowed early upon them. To the other settlers, Grandpa Deal seemed as substantial as the native hickory timber in whose clearing he had built his house. He was both freighter and farmer. 2 of the grown sons worked his place, while he himself drove the 6 ox team over the long trail to Dubuque and back with freight for the whole community. For this, and for his reputation as a wit, he was known far and wide. To fully appreciate his wit, one must have taken Grandma Deal into account, for she was the background against which his droll sayings stood forth. The little wiry woman, fretful, energetic, and humorless, was intolerant of wasting time in fun-making. Grandpa Deal, kind, easygoing, and jolly, was always picking up every little saying of his partner's to bandy it about with sly drollness. There was never any loud laughter on his part, just a twinkle in the sharp blue eyes, appreciative of his outlook on life. Grandma Deal spent her time hustling about, darting in and out, scolding at Grandpa, finding fault with the children, the well sweep, the weather, everything that came under her eagle eye or into her busy brain. Just now, however, Grandma was not scolding. Grandpa was not joking. The news of impending disaster had brought them to a common ground of fear. Most of the other families of the community had gathered now in the larger and stronger Deal home in response to the rumor of the Indian uprising. Already the men were stationing guns near the windows and barring and barricading the doors. Several women were running bullets in the little salamander stove, a queer affair whose short legs in front and long legs in back gave it the appearance of an inverted giraffe. One woman was hysterical. Another, a little out of her mind from fear, kept wanting to go back outdoors where there was air. All night they waited for whatever fate had in store for them. In the morning, a man rode up on horseback, a young boy about Willie Deal's age, behind him in the saddle. It was Doc Matthews, who had come to bring word that the hostile band of Indians had gone north. Immediately there was the confusion of getting ready to leave. Grandpa Deal told those who lived farthest away to stay and make a visit for the day. Abby could hear Grandma Deal sputtering about her husband's free-handed hospitality. The boy who had came with Doc Matthews was his son Ed. He had been east all year to a boys' boarding school. He was dressed in a nice suit and a flat white collar and a little round hat. He stood and looked at Willie Deal in his homespun suit. Willie Deal stood and looked at Eddie Matthews from the Philadelphia boarding school. Their contempt seemed mutual. The Indian scare then had gone into nothing. The wagons went lumbering back across the prairie and through the damp, dark river road where the hazel brush and the sumac nodded together under the native oaks and hickories. All summer long, the Mackenzies lived in the sheep shed, while their own log house was being built. James and Tom Graves were building it, and Denny was helping, battening the inside with long split saplings and filling the chinks with mud. All summer long, Abby went happily in and out of the sheep shed with the patchwork quilt in front for the door. There were so many lovely things to do that one did not know how to find time for them all. There were flowers in the deep, dark recesses of the big woods, wild honeysuckles and bouncing bets and tall ferns that one could pretend were long, sweeping white plumes. Sometimes Abby would take one of the longest of the ferns and with a slender twig pin it on a wild grapevine leaf or a plantain for a hat. Then she would drape one of her mother's dark shawls around her sturdy little body and, standing on a grassy hillock in the clearing, pretend she was Isabel Anders Mackenzie, the lovely lady. And then she had a whole set of dishes hidden in the hollow of an oak at the edge of the timberland. James had made them for her from acorns, removing the nut and whittling little handles for the cups. Then she had a child for which she must care constantly. It was an elongated shaped stone with a small round formation on one end for its head. She put little Basil's outgrown dress on it and knitted a bonnet. She liked the feeling of the stone against her breast. It seemed heavy and like a real baby. Sometimes in carrying it about, her heart would swell in potential mother love for it. But sometimes there was no need to pretend about a baby, for there was Janet's real live one to hold and rock. Janet had a low wooden trundle bed for him that pushed under the big bed. It was rough on the outside, and the ends were made from the sawed round discs of a tree. One afternoon, Willie Deal came up to the big woods with his shaggy-haired father to see Tom Graves. Willie Deal had remembered Abby and brought her a small plant in a clay jar he had made. The plant was a green, lacy fern-like thing, and there were 3 little round scarlet balls on it. "Whatever are they?" Abby wanted to know. "They're love apples," Willie told her, "but don't ever dare put one in your mouth. They're tremendous poisonous." Abby promised that she would never so much as touch the poison. For how could Willie Deal and Abby Mackenzie in the 50s know anything about vitamin-filled tomatoes? And then in the fall, Janet's baby was not quite well. No one seemed to know what the matter could be. Maggie O'Connor Mackenzie doctored him with castor oil and peppermint. Grandma Deal sent word by Tom Graves to give him sassafras tea and tie a little bag of asafoetida around his neck. When he seemed no better, Janet, pale and worried, said maybe they ought to send for Dr. Matthews. Abby was frightened beyond measure when she heard that, for she well knew that a doctor was the last resort for saving one who was sick. Tom went out immediately to saddle a horse and go for the doctor. Janet told Abby to hold the baby while she went out to the lean-to kitchen for warm water. Mother Mackenzie had gone over to her own home for flannel cloths. And then Abby was calling them and crying all in the same breath, "Janet, Mother, come quick! Oh, come!" Janet was in the room like a flash, a wild bittern at the call of its young. Abby could scarcely talk for crying. "I was just holding him as steady. He acted queer, and he threw up his arms. He got kind of bluish. What ought to I have done?" Dr. Matthews came with Tom. He said yes, the baby was dead. Janet was wild with grief. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she rocked the little cold form back and forth in her arms and would not let them take him from her. Rachel, who lives again in every grieving mother, was crying for her child and would not be comforted. Over in their own cabin, Abby sobbed aloud on the bed. Suddenly she sat up. "I hate God," she said. Maggie Mackenzie hushed her quickly and told her it was a tremendous wicked to say that. "But he made death. I hate death. I hate it." "The poor Colleen," her mother said to Belle. "She's smart like the Mackenzies, but faith, and she has the Irish heart."